Now we should be back.
Okay.
Let me know if you would, Lori and Bob, that you see Type for Techies. Because it says it's sharing.
I'm seeing it. Yeah, we're good. I'm going to mute my mic,
Okay,
Carolyn,
thanks.
so unless you need me, I'll stay quiet, okay?
Absolutely. Welcome. This is the second meeting of Type for Techies, How to Use Type Effectively with a High-Tech Audience. I am happy to be with you here again today. We're going to get into some meat here today. We're going to open with any blinding flash of the obvious or ahas or questions from last time. And then we're going to go into the meat of it. We've got 3 more points to handle on engaging them, and then we're going to go into the meat of the materials from type theory, temperament theory, the 8-function model, what works, what gives you the biggest bang for the buck for helping the IT crowd, the high-tech crowd. It doesn't have to be a software company. I want to make that clear. This is for the highly technical audience. It can be a scientific laboratory kind of audience. They're very similar to IT audiences in makeup. Any basic kind of high-tech company audiences will have, with varying degrees in different departments, but will have groups of people in large enough numbers that these biggest bang for the buck teachings I'm going to be talking about here are going to apply to you if you work with such audiences. And I want to make clear another point. This is not just about teaching workshops. I did both things. I both taught workshops and did customized work with groups in what I call team coaching after a more public, larger workshop. And the third thing I did was coach managers. And my examples come from both coaching and teaching because some people are coaching, some people are teaching, and the points apply in both places. Some of the deepest learnings I had about what are these biggest bang for the buck points, why they were so impactful, I got actually from the coaching sessions because that's when I got to help managers and directors understand why they found themselves in challenging situations with their IT staff and how I could help them achieve more understanding and be more effective with each other. So here's the agenda for today, and I am going to, first I'd like to ask Laurie or Christy. Laurie, I'll give you a moment to swallow something and ask, would you like to share, is there anything from last week, anything that troubles you or anything that seemed especially useful? Aha, or question. I'm kind of, all things are fair game here now for you to say where you are and anything you're specifically interested in about today.
Well, the useful thing for me that I found, excuse me, if I do an MBTI workshop, I stress that it's about getting to understand who you are and why you are the way you are and what makes you tick, and really put the emphasis there rather than having people try to, like you said earlier, go home and try to figure out who another person is. But when you said last week that to introduce this particular session on how to be effective, that resonated with me and with the technical type of people that I work with. That if I were to tell them it's about learning and to understand themselves, we're getting into that soft, fuzzy, feely stuff. But if I instead focus on the effectiveness, I think that will be of more value to them and get them interested sooner rather than later.
This is great. This is Carol. That's great. Thanks so much, Laurie. Absolutely. And why that's effective is because that's speaking their language and it's speaking to something they're directly concerned with as opposed to something that sounds warm and fuzzy. So thank you, Laurie. You are now officially a choir member, and I appreciate your joining the choir. Christy, is there anything you'd like to share? Aha, blinding flash, the obvious, or a question?
Well, I appreciate Lori going first because I did have a mouthful of sushi just as you said my name, so that bought me a little bit of time to swallow. I thought it was really, the first section was a good balance of giving us some kind of conceptual ideas and then also getting into some very specifics about how you manage those groups. So some of the very specific examples you gave about this is what I say when I start the session, were helpful for me, and it helps me to think about how I can sort of translate that in a way that works for me, so that I'm not just taking what you're doing, but kind of generating my own spin on it, if that makes sense.
This is Carol. That makes absolutely perfect sense. And please know, I never mean when I give y'all specific words that I want anybody to parrot what I said. I guess it's showing through here that I'm a high auditory learner. And when people say things conceptually to me, sometimes my brain goes, and what would that sound like? And it just gives me a starting point if I hear how somebody says something and what that would sound like. So thank you for, one, telling me it was useful, and for two, telling me you get it. I wasn't trying to make you parrot something. I was just trying to be useful. Thanks a lot. Okay, ladies, we will. I will give you one more opportunity if you need to say something. Is there anything about today? You've had the handout. Is there anything looking at this you especially want to make sure I spend time on that you're especially interested in? Because I will be happy to give more time to a place that is of more natural interest to you or seems of greater value to you. And I'll just give you a moment to think about that if you want to point me in a particular direction to emphasize something. And if not, we'll go on. And ladies, please feel free to speak up when we get somewhere. If you want more time or less time spent on something, seriously, let me know, because this is about your learning, and I'm happy to focus what's most useful to you. So, anything, ladies? We're ready to go.
Ready.
I'm good.
Okay, thanks. So we'll resume with engaging them. I want to show you something. I'm going to take about 5 minutes with this. This is, by the way, did either of you get a chance to go out and check out Dr. Nardi's paper, Keys to Cognition? It's all right if you didn't. I just sent the link so you could see where it was.
No, I didn't yet.
Okay, that's fine. I'm going to show you a few slides, and I'm actually going to show you here what slides I show them that is particularly useful. I am going to, your screen may go gray. Tell me when it comes back up, because what I'm going to do is start sharing from his slide deck, and it shows me sharing, got meeting burn on the top left corner, but we'll have to live with that. Ladies, are you seeing This Is Your Brain on Type?
I am.
Yes.
Great, thank you. Okay, this is available to you on the Internet. I'm so glad he makes this available. And the only reason, by the way, we're starting here instead of with his book, which came out in Bob and I got to hear him speak on this at the conference in August. The only reason I'm showing you this instead of the book, something in the book is in black and white, and I'm sure that was for economic reasons. But the slide deck here is actually in color, and it really, really helps that this is in color. And it has, ladies, they sit transfixed. I mean, they're not moving. They're staring at the screen, and the wheels are turning. I do this for two reasons. One, I use a topic in it that is something, extroversion, introversion, which is easy to do in just a couple of minutes, and they really get from the beginning because they understand. Some of us are more introverted and some of us are more extroverted by nature. The second point is this makes it very real to them and gives it credibility, because we're now talking about something that can be measured in a laboratory, and we're going to see. And basically my patter about this goes, this is a paper by Dr. Dario Nardi. He is a professor at, and let me get to the slide, he is a professor at UCLA. There you see the fellow in the middle in the green T-shirt who looks about 15 years old, is actually the college professor. That's Dr. Nardi, and these are students in his lab. And what we're going to do is take about 5 minutes to see something exciting he's been able to show in a laboratory setting, which is we can actually show through using EEG equipment, we can actually show which regions of the brain are lighting up when the brain is using particular kinds of function. For example, they would have a subject for 90 minutes, they'd give them a series of tasks. And then they would have, if you look at the woman to the right next to the computer, see that red cap? The white dots on the red cap are sensors, actually, and that is allowing them to do a brain reading. So the researcher sits and looks at a laptop. It looks just like this. If you notice the colors in the brain, they, of course, have nothing to do with any colors taking place in our brain. It's about, the next slide shows it, it's about, excuse me, I have to go back for this. It shows levels of activity in the brain. So when you see colors on the screen, it's just showing you which part of the brain has got most electrical activity going on in it at that point in time. And they give the people different tasks to do, and they engage in dialogue with them, and they see which parts of the brain light up when you're doing particular kinds of things. So here we are, and here we're putting on a red cap. Now, this is a fascinating paper. I encourage you to look at it. There's one thing that you can get in and out of very quickly and has a very big impact on them and makes a great teaching point as well. Now, what I'm going to show you is one specific exercise he does, and you're going to see it right here. They sit someone with self-reporting, self-validating, clear introverted preference. They have them in front of the screen, and we start with the extrovert, someone with clear extrovert preferences, and they've told the subject, we're about to show you an image on the screen. So as you can see, the person's brain is going kind of silent. There's one frontal lobe a little active because this is an extroverted person who's been told, I'm about to show you something. So as you can imagine, they're literally sitting there waiting on something to be shown. The picture at the bottom, this is how the brain lit up when the image was shown, which makes perfect sense. This is the extroverted subject who has now been shown something on the screen, and it's lit up different regions of the brain that's processing the image. Very straightforward. Now I'm going to move forward to the next slide, and I'm going to show you how different this looks when they started with a subject who had self-reported clear preferences for introversion. Same exercise, been told we're about to show you something on the screen. The top image, the bottom image is going to be, and now we're showing the image. And this is the activity. When I first do this, there's dead silence, and then ahs and laughter starts happening. And I say, guys, when your introverted preference colleague, or when you get home, your introverted preference spouse says, I really need quiet time right now, I want you to take that seriously. That bottom picture on the right is a setup for burnout. That person with enough of that activity during the day literally can get worn out from it, and that person literally needs downtime so that they can recharge their batteries by having some peace and quiet and thinking to themselves. There's a wonderful book called The Introvert Advantage. It talks about how different the brain chemistry works, that the clear extroverted preference brain thrives on dopamine, whereas the clear introverted preference brain thrives on acetylcholine and is actually overstimulated by the amount of dopamine it takes to comfortably stimulate an extroverted person's brain. This is very real. What's going on? We really need to honor the differences. This is not about anyone being oversensitive. This is about natural differences in brain chemistry, and it behooves us to honor and respect this and not to ignore it. And I'll end. That's basically what I say there. So, ladies, I did this for, I guess I've done this for 3 years now. And I have actually had people say at the end of the day when they share Plus Delta that one of the most impactful things for them in the training was seeing this. So, ladies, if I need to stop and ask, what is your, do you have a take on this? What's your response to this?
This is Christy. I don't know that I have much to add, except that it certainly is fascinating, and I can see how with a particularly technical group that they would receive this very well.
This is Carol. Thanks. Absolutely. Laura, did you want to add anything?
Well, you said that this is when the self-reported preference was clearly extroverted and clearly introverted, so those that are moderate or slight aren't necessarily going to go to these extremes, so to speak. Is that correct?
This is Carol. That's the inference I would make. I would have to ask Dr. Nardi that question and get an authoritative answer. That's what I would hypothesize, but I don't know that. But yes, I would imagine that. And we do know there are people more in the middle. So I'm imagining the brain chemistry reflects that, but I don't know that for a fact. I am really, now that said, another thing I teach them about introversion and extroversion comes out of the 8 function theory. We are not, even those of us who have a clear preference, we are not completely introverted or completely extroverted. We all extrovert some mental functions and we all introvert others. And that if you want to see an introvert turn into an extroverted presentation right in front of your eyes, you talk with them one-on-one, ask them one-on-one about something they're passionate about. And you can see an introvert get very extroverted. And when an introvert gets into their extroverted function, they can come across as extroverted because they are extroverting. At that point in time, they are in an extroverted function and they are extroverted. So I don't stop where we used to stop with introversion, extroversion. I take it to the next level and talk about it's more complex than that we're just introverts or extroverts. And especially when I do one-on-one coaching, I help managers see that it's the preference they introvert is the one they're probably not remembering to say things out loud to their staff. Therefore, those things are hidden and unintentionally hidden from their staff, so they're not getting as clear understanding as they would. Example, an ESTP marketing group manager at a high-tech company introverts his thinking. And I was sharing this information with him, that he extroverts his sensing, so he extroverts jump in and do stuff. But in his office by himself, he uses introverted thinking to analyze and come up with a plan. But when he walks in the meeting, he doesn't talk with them about the plan. He talks about what we're going to do. And I talked about his preference can come across as leaping before he looks and as being impulsive and not thinking it through. And I wish I had a videotape of the profound look on his face. And the light bulb turned on, and he said, I have thought it through, but I get why they think I haven't, because I never share that piece with them. I do that on my own. And I've had several conversations with technical managers where a big aha for them is the piece of what they're doing that's not getting said out loud and why that's mysterious to their staff and how they can get greater clarity if they would go against their natural impulse, which is to say out loud some of what they've done with their introverted function. Ladies, does that make sense? Does that sound useful here?
Very much.
Okay, great. I don't want it to sound like it's going off topic. I wanted to good, because that's one of the kinds of things I learned not from using this to teach, but in the classroom experience, but I used it in the coaching environment, and that actually helped inform what I used more in the teaching environment.
Carol, may I say something about scores?
Please, Bob. Thank you.
I think that Dario was working with people that were clear as to their preference, not so much clear on their scores. Because the scoring there are no Jungian-based instruments where the score measures strength of preference. And the literature is telling us that we should never interpret that score as strength of preference. And so I would be careful about putting that type of connotation on those numbers.
Oh, this is Carol, Bob. I never meant to use the word strength. I try to always remember to use the word clarity of preference. People's clarity about.
But if we talk about somebody scoring near the middle, maybe not showing the same pattern, that isn't implying the score. I just want to make sure we're very clear that MBTI does not measure strength of preference. It only tells us how well the items are working at indicating a preference for a person. And, we just, so that we don't go use the scores incorrectly. That's all I'm concerned about.
Carol, thanks. So, guys, further on engaging them, last 3 points here, and we'll be done with this. One is the adjusting for the high level of introverted preference in the room. The quietness in the room, as an ENFP, I had never been in as quiet and still a room as I was when I started dealing with especially frontline IT staff. Once I got to the senior director level, it was a more even balance of introverted and extroverted behaviors in the room, and I was in a more, what was a more, normal's not a good word to hear, but an environment I was more accustomed to. I had to adjust my extroverted preferences in this room. One, I had to dial down my expressiveness and my extroverted behaviors to a certain extent. And the second thing I learned to do very quickly, it all happens at the small table exercises. So I would I would say a question to the room, and then I would immediately say, discuss that at your tables. And if you just throw a question out to a room with that heavy a preference of introversion, literally nothing happens. Well, I mean, it's happening inside their head. It's not being said. But if you immediately say, please discuss that at your tables, and I always sit them in pods, I never do schoolroom, the buzzing starts immediately. And I learned that because it was a very quiet room, but the first time I called a break, they immediately clustered in groups of 2s and 3s, and the room buzzed. So I made my adjustment that everything happens at the small table. Now, after they've had a discussion, I will give folks a chance. They would even like to share something said at your table with the room, some aha you had. And at that point, usually from a table or two, someone is willing to speak to the room at large. That was a clear change I had to make. Next point is I got this from an clear introverted preference colleague. I seat no more than 4 people at a table. There's no way I would have come up with that number by myself. I'm astonished. But I believe she's right, and it works well. She said I could easily get lost in a table of 5. I'll talk at a table of 4. And the people in the room are more like her than they are like me, so I listen to her. And it works well. And in all my public workshops now, try to balance so that the introverted preference students have as positive an experience and as equal a footing as they can in my classroom. I do not everything, but a lot of what happens at those small tables, and I seat them in tables all the time. Last couple of points. One point is I use recent data and recent examples. Katrina is getting a little older at this point. But stories that come out of the news saying some kind of example from a recent book, I'm going to show you several things here, makes a point that this is alive and well and in the real world, and it's not just old book stuff and theory stuff. And the last piece is I try to use cartoons. Dilbert, guys, seriously, you cannot miss with Dilbert. This is the Dilbert crowd. Scott Adams is a Dilbert kind of person himself. He came from an IT background at Pacific Bell. So Dilbert cartoons always. And I added something this time, some pilot things that I'll share with you when we get. Well, here's one. I actually had the exciting chance of working last December with a flight division of a company. And these are technical people, okay? They're not IT people, but these are highly technical, not at all warm and fuzzy people and not interested in warm and fuzzy stuff. And I added these pilot quotes. And there are, I also use these with my regular classes, and I think astronauts and pilots would work well in an IT room too. So I'm going to keep these around for when I do a purely technical group again. What y'all's take on that, ladies? Any take on how well pilot and astronaut quotes would work with a room full of folks, of your IT folks?
Well, having worked with both, they're pretty much, well, not astronauts, I guess, but with pilots, they are technical guys.
Right.
But if I remember from the charts last week, most of the people in the room were not improvisers.
No, they're not improvisers. In the one IT group, I sent you an additional report, there is one kind of IT group that does have a lot of improvisers, and it's, I call them different things in different companies, but basically it's the computer room staff and hardware support staff. People who come out and get your equipment and make your phone work and handle your BlackBerry problems. When you get to the data center people, I guess that's the global term that works there. The data center people are improvisers. The rest of the groups, you're right, very low incidence of improvisers, but those folks are. Good memory there. Here's a stabilizer quote. I actually got this off a CNN broadcast. Picture of a Marine. I wish I had the clip of it. I'd use it if I had it. Picture of a Marine in front of a truck full of lumber. And the CNN reporter was interviewing and taping him, and he says, it's a big mess over here. A lot of work to be done in cleaning it up. Feels good to be a part of it. And I do this during the temperament exercise, and I say, at your tables, there are 4 clues in here that could be part of classic stabilizer temperament. Tell me what those are. And this is giving them a chance in a fun way to apply their learning. And they get the clues. Big mess, a lot of work, cleaning it up, feels good to be a part of it. Now, it doesn't mean I point out that person being interviewed is a stabilizer. He could have been an improviser Marine. Still, that said, that quote's got a lot of good classic stabilizer responses in it that they get and respond to well. This is pulling something out of the current media. I asked them, I use this in the stabilizer portion of temperament theory. Warren Buffett, Invest Like a Girl, and Why You Should Too. That's a very real best-selling book title. And I asked him the question, what is Warren Buffett's #1 rule for investing? Warren Buffett's not an improviser. He's not a gunslinger on Wall Street. I wanted to make the point that people taking care of money, that we're not just looking at gunslingers. Stabilizers do a whole lot of the money controlling in the country. And his #1 rule of investing is don't lose money, which is not a rule the gunslingers on Wall Street will walk around having. Again, just trying to, in a fun way, in a way that relates it to the real world and people they might know and respect, connecting it to what's real for them. I guess that boils down to, 1, speaking their language and then connecting it to what's real for them. So, ladies, I'm ready to wrap that session up and move on to biggest bang for the buck. If you are, what comments or questions, if any, do you want to relate to about framing it in a way that engages them before we move on to the biggest bang for the buck learning theory?
No, that sounds good.
Okay. Okay, biggest bang for the buck learning theory. We're going to hit type theory, temperament, 8-function model, and the step 2 facets. Ladies, I won't take a lot of time on the step 2. I'll just take a few minutes, but I did want to show you a couple of things in it that really connected for them. The whole point, I'm going to even show you a couple of things there because you may get ideas from that on how to connect it otherwise with them. A lot of text on here. I'm just got some talking points here. By the way, I sent you the sensing and intuiting exercise I use. I kind of do a 2-step process with sensing and intuiting. I start with what Dick Thompson taught me, which is teaching the functions as languages, because people are focusing on different things and using different actual words and vocabulary because they're focusing on different things. And this is a huge, huge problem, can be, for their communicating. And the 2 stories I've got here I actually got from coaching situations. And the second one, actually got shared in the training room by the ENTJ preference director. So I'll share that story too, because it really brings home the point. This is a problem for them when they have clear preferences between, and I'll speak here the examples of INTJ and ISTJ. It, of course, applies to the other NTs and STs as well. Why this is huge, I won't go over the exercise. I sent it to you, and I'm happy to talk about it with you later, but I'd like to tell the stories that indicate what this is, how this is an issue. I was coaching an INTJ, very high level, very technical marketing director, not advertising marketing, but the person who helped connect the internal technical people with a particular part of the marketplace. And guys, this woman was so INTJ, she told me twice what she did. Guys, I'm the ENFP. I can usually get intuitive language things, but she was so introverted intuition and so high level and global and conceptual in her language. I never completely understood. She did high level conceptual architecture stuff, but it had nothing to do with hardware. It was all putting the different pieces together so that they could apply the software to a particular industry. Well, it turns out the IST statisticians didn't know what she was talking about either. And she was talking to me about, she kept meeting with them and nothing kept happening. And I actually knew all those. Guys, these were directors with PhDs in statistics. These were not lazy people. These were not resistant people. These were high-level, very intelligent, very bright, hardworking people who had reputations in the company for making things happen. I knew there was something going on. If things were not happening, it's because there was a miscommunication happening, not because of quote-unquote people difficulties. And so I explained to her the difference between intuiting as a language, conceptual, big picture words, and sensing more concrete, specific use of language. ISTJs, statisticians are pretty concrete, specific in their, tangible in their use of language. And I literally stood up and I put my foot out and held it out like I was going to step on something. And I said, what you're asking them to do is move forward with you into a future they cannot see yet. And you're not giving them, they need something concrete to put their foot down on to move forward with you. They're not getting concrete enough language from you to have anything to put their foot on. They're not stepping forward and creating these things because they have nothing to put their foot on to walk forward with you. And the light bulb went off, and her jaw dropped, and she said slowly, they're not doing anything because they think I haven't said anything to do yet. And it was a huge aha for her that she had to learn to speak more tangibly and more specifically so that they could hear something concrete enough to take action on. I mean, guys, these were high-level people. These were incredibly expensive meetings to be running that nothing was happening from. This is something the company was developing, investing millions of dollars in, and something was not moving forward at all because a group of people of one preference could not understand the person from the other preference. I mean, this is not about some theoretical, conceptual thing of we talk different languages. This was about dollars being wasted, very high-level people and high-level dollars not having an impact in a technical environment because they were speaking different languages. And it's often a huge aha for the INTJ, ENTJ manager that it's never an ENTP for that matter, it's never occurring to them to get specific enough. The second story literally happened in the training room, and we were talking about how from the intuitive preference, everything hooks back, especially for the ENTJ, especially for the theorist temperament at this point. And I was talking about how everything has to hook back up into the big picture perspective, and it's a very global perspective. And context matters. The intuitive preference doesn't know where to go forward until they get the context. That the details mean nothing out of context. And one of the things I teach the sensing preference team members is to use one sentence. It can be just one sentence. It can be a phrase with a comma to state a context and then jump into the detail level, that you actually see the eyes glaze over of the intuitive team members if you just start with all the details. If you start with the context, then the person with the intuitive preferences can clue into what you're saying and can hang in there and do those details. But until they have the context, they don't have the right bucket to open up in their head for the details to go into. And an ENTJ director stood up and said how much she resonated with what I was saying. She said people walk into her office, and frankly, she had a lot of ISTJ statisticians reporting to her. And she said they would ask her a question, and she would say, well, it depends. Tell me why you want to know. Now, guys, her answer was just mysterious and made no sense to the ISTJs who reported to her when they walked into her office and what seemed like a perfectly straightforward question for her that they just needed her to give them a freaking answer to. And it was very mysterious to them, her, and she stood up and very eloquently, let's say, and beautifully explained why she said that to them all the time and why it made perfect sense to her brain to say that and why she literally did not know how to answer their question until they told her the context and why they were asking her that. It was really, if I can do a warm, fuzzy thing with you two, it was really a beautiful moment where an ENTJ got a chance to explain very openly why their dialogue went a certain way. And guys, seriously, things can move forward in groups when we can help them get this kind of misunderstanding out of the way. Before I move on to the next few pieces here, ladies, any questions, any comments from that?
I'm just sitting here thinking, this is Christy, does it help, I get the ahas that people have, are they able to change the language that they're speaking? Like, for example, the INTJ, she got the issue with the ISTJs that she wasn't communicating in a very tactical way with them and that she needs to do more of that. But is she been able to do that, or is just the fact that both parties involved understand why it's happening, is that enough to improve the situation? Does that make sense?
Your question makes perfect sense. This is Carol. And it's a twofold answer. One, we have to help them reach understanding. Secondly, there's a lot of research that shows that they get more knowledge retention and more actual behavior changes if they get follow-up support like coaching after an event. I highly advocate that at least the leadership on a team get a few follow-up meetings with you afterwards to help them apply their specific behaviors, and also to get long enough time in the classroom that after they learn a point, immediately have a small exercise that lets them at their table discuss an actual situation, actual words they would use to apply this. And the buzzing starts. The buzzing starts in the room immediately when you make time in the classroom. The challenge is getting them to give you long enough in the classroom to make that happen. What I've learned to do is not agree to hopelessly short time frames that I know all I can do a data dump in, because no, you're right, the data dump doesn't help. Giving them time to apply it in the classroom, number one, helps. The second point is follow-up coaching. But yeah, they really can learn. That these are bright people. They can learn to speak that other language, and yeah, it takes effort. And yeah, they have to practice. Good question.
Yeah.
Thank you. And was that Christy?
Yes, it was.
Okay, thanks. Good. Laurie, do you have anything to ask or comment on before we move on?
No, I was just going to say it's been my experience that, to answer Christy's question as well, when people find that the communication isn't working, that to use that as the red flag, to say, okay, what am I saying that they may not be understanding? And sometimes just that subliminal nudge that says, wait a minute, this is broken again, can oftentimes be the catalyst to get them to start thinking of a different way of saying something.
This is Carol. Laurie, thanks for that. I made a note of that. Well said. I'm going to go into, I've got slides on this. We're going to go into extroverted and introverted thinking here in a minute because I've got an extended piece on that I have found to be huge for them. It makes immediate sense for them and huge. I've actually already covered the extrovert and introvert point. I have found with one ISTJ manager in particular, just a small note, that it helped him. He introverts his sensing, so he did all his data gathering on his own, and then he just he met with the staff, and then he, from his extroverted thinking, told them what they were going to do. And I knew his plan would be better accepted if he engaged them in the data gathering part. It would not naturally occur to him to engage them in the data gathering part. And when I did, he reported back to me his kickoff meeting was much more successful, and he had them much more engaged when he did a kickoff meeting that January, having included them in the data gathering part. Because, guys, we don't naturally think to look external, because if we introvert that function, for him it was his data gathering function, it doesn't occur to us. It's not that we're ignoring people or not valuing their input. It just doesn't occur to us to go use an extroverted function where we naturally use an introverted one. J and P, I really don't teach traditional J and P the way I used to do it, because really it's about your judging and, which function you extrovert, whether you extrovert your judging function. So are you extrovert your perceiving function? And I really use 8 functions to teach that now. There's one thing I have found useful, 2 things here I have found useful with these groups that really is a source of stress. The first one is the natural tendency to perhaps overuse your favorite preference. If you extrovert your judging function, then, and this is, there's neurology attached here. There is an internal pressure earlier instead of later to get closure to things. And if you extrovert your data gathering function, then you are you tend to be more comfortable for longer in the data gathering part of the process. In fact, those folks start getting uncomfortable when we start getting closure, because 1, it's closing off options and they like options, and 2, they have a greater need for gathering data. They're not comfortable coming to closure until they've got more data than the other person tends to need to be comfortable coming to closure. And we talk about, then we have a discussion about what stresses, how not being conscious of that on a team causes stresses in the room that we don't need to let happen. One is, I ask them, what can happen if you start coming to closure too early in the process of a project before you've gathered all the data you really need to make a good decision? And they immediately start saying, well, you make the wrong decision, you do this, you have to do things over. They know what happens. I don't have to tell them what happens. And then I talk about, okay, so you may need to self-monitor yourself. Early at the start of a project, be aware. It may be your natural impulse, may be to start pressing for closure sooner than it's really helpful to the group to press for closure. And you may need to self-regulate that and get in your out of your comfort zone to hang out in data gathering longer than you're comfortable. And then I said, and vice versa, if you are comfortable doing more data gathering and coming to closure starts making you uncomfortable, what happens if you hang out too long in the course of a project still doing data gathering and not coming to closure? And they immediately start talking about, well, you miss deadlines, you keep second-guessing yourself. So they get it that a strength overused is what the problem is. It's not that either one of these things is a problem, but a strength overused becomes like that hammer. If all we have is a hammer, every problem starts looking a lot like a nail. And that's a nice discussion, because most of these people, frankly, are on pretty long-term projects together. Software development cycles are projects, and there's really a lot of stress around projects. The last one is early starting pressure prompted. Now, I don't teach those as correlating with J and P. We used to teach the idea about being pressure prompted if you had a perceiving preference, if you had a clear preference for P, that you pressure prompting may come naturally to you and you literally don't get the energy. The energy literally doesn't rise up within you to put the effort to meet the deadline until right before it needs to be met. And what we know from the Step 2 data is, one of the gifts of that data is it shows us that there's not a complete correlation between being pressure prompted and early starting and having a so-called P preference and a J preference. In fact, only, 40% of pressure prompted folks do not. P preference folks are not pressure prompted. I myself am an early starting preference ENFP. And I have run into a number of ENTJs and ESTJs who are pressure prompted and not early starting. And we have a really nice discussion around how being pressure prompted puts serious stress on the other people around you if they're early starting. And we talk about using milestones to help pressure prompted team members get the energy they need to meet interim deadlines. Because if you have a long-term deadline, it's just death to somebody who's pressure prompted to have a 6 or 9 month deadline hanging out there. They're going to have to be milestones. And how that's a way for everybody to win. The early starting project manager wins if we've got milestones. That helps them monitor and helps them not get in a fearful place, we're not going to make it. And it also helps the pressure-prompted, usually team member, find the energy they need to meet those deadlines and not be driving other people on the project crazy. Because, guys, seriously, this is a really big source of stress on those teams. And these are two places that we can really help them get it, that these behaviors are creating unnecessary stress. And we are showing them ways that they can dial that down and make the teamwork go more smoothly. So any comments there before we move on?
I'm good.
Okay. Does this seem applicable to folks you've worked with? Does this seem useful?
Well, absolutely.
Sorry, ladies, my cursor went up too high. I'm clicking in the window. Sorry, it popped out. Hold on. There we go. Are we back?
Yeah,
Yep.
I can see it.
Okay, very good. Sorry, there's a delay. If the cursor moves out, unfortunately, it activates. It's very sensitive. Okay, I am going to show you a step two, and I'll go through this very quickly since you don't use the step two. Oh, here's Jack's sample. Excuse me, I should have my step two open, and I don't, so we'll use Jack's sample step two open. I sent you mine, and I'll just show you the pages I show them. I show them page 3, just gives them the 4 letters they're accustomed to looking at. And then I'll work through these 4 pages here. And what it shows is that the step 2 measures 20 additional things, in addition to the 4 poles, E, I, S, N, T, F, J, P. In addition to that, it measures 5 different things on each pole. And, guys, one of the big payoffs for using this, and I don't always use it, but when a group has the money to spend on these reports, because these reports are like $38 a piece. This is not a trivial expense you're asking for here. With an IT group in particular, I found this accomplished 2 things. One, this made them feel less put in the box, which, guys, buys you a lot of leeway with them. Their resistance goes down tremendously when they don't feel put in a box. And 2, especially the fact that text down below is even personalized based on in preference, out of preference, or mid-zone. Those are the three levels of customization here in the language. It really makes them feel seen as individuals, and it also helps get across the point. I say, guys, you're complex beings. You're not toggle switches. It's not all one or the other. And that's another nice thing this version of the instrument shows. Myers-Briggs never intended to put anybody in a box or make anybody feel put in a box. Unfortunately, that can be one of the fallouts of it, and this particular piece of the instrument helps resolve that a lot. And go ahead.
This is Christy. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, go ahead.
I don't want to see sidetracked on the step 2, but I'm not familiar with it and have not used it before. Can you just tell me briefly kind of what the process is when you use it? Are they taking just the step 2 instrument, or are they taking the MBTI and this, and then how do you share both of those with them? Just kind of quickly give me an overview of how that works.
Sure, this is Carol. In a nutshell, step 1 actually encompasses the original MBTI, which we now call, step 2 is really 2 instruments. It's really the original measures the 4-pole instruments, and it has a totally different set of questions that measure what we're calling the facets, which are the additional 20 things it's reporting on. So they're really taking 2 instruments at one time. It can be done on pen and paper. I actually used the web-driven version. They got sent a link. They went to a website. I always meet with them first to tell them how to take it to get the most accurate results, and I've had real good success getting accurate results if they get, and I'll be glad to send you that if you're interested, what I tell them that I think is very helpful there, because I have gotten really, really good feedback on how accurate they can get these reports to come back, and that buys a lot of credibility with them too. So it's web-driven. They take it. I give them the explanation, and then I pass the reports out, and they look at the reports, and it's really, most people I never get to have a one-on-one with just because they didn't seek me out afterwards. Coaching clients, I really like doing this one-on-one with coaching clients. Shoot, I would do it one-on-one with everybody if I got a chance, just after the major workshop, going over their report, because there's valuable stuff in here. There really is. Is that useful?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. And there's also wonderful, if you do coaching, here's wonderful information recommending how they might, what their preference might be, and how, you see that enhancing change management. Here's one on decision-making, change management, conflict, just some nice coaching things. Really can give you nice fodder as a coach to use with people. I don't go over those in the class. I point them out that it's there for them. And the last place I show them is this, and this is why I want to say this to you. It tells you in the step 2 instructions to not share this page with the client, to take this page off before you give it to them. Guys, I share this page, one more page. I'm sorry, not that page. This is just a summary page. This page, they tell you to take page 17 out and not show it with the client. I show it to the high-level IT client for one reason. These people have mathematical and statistical, a lot of them, statistical backgrounds. It is meaningful to tell them that that horizontal blue bar reports the range of answers plus or minus 1 standard deviation from the mean. The thin, vertical, darker blue bar in the middle is the mean itself, and the black numeral in the blue bar is where they fall within that range. And guys, this buys a lot of credibility with these folks. It really does. They know what plus or 1 minus standard deviation from the mean is. This is real numbers to them, and it means something. And, you know, what Bob said, again, I try to stress with people, guys, this is not measuring how much anybody has of anything. This can only report the clarity. On the day you took the instrument, this is the clarity you expressed in this preference. It doesn't say how much of anything you do or don't have. It's about clarity. That said, this can be, if it's accurate for you, this can be useful, provide useful information. Definitely, like Bob said, help them not attach it to, I have this much of this. It's not about having more or less of anything. All it claims to measure is the clarity with which you expressed your preference. And ladies, that's all the time I was going to take up for that because you may or may not use a step 2. But seriously, these few things I'm showing you here can buy you a lot of credibility with those people, so I wanted you to see that for that reason.
Hey, Carol.
Yes, sir.
You just took it away, but, if you go back to that one, if you can, just a minute, what you were saying about the pressure-prompted issue in J and P
right.
is really driven home in that sample.
Oh, excellent. Okay, great. All right. Oh, look at that. Absolutely. Isn't that useful? Very useful. I tend to find more pressure-prompted E's than I's, but that is very interesting. Bob, did you run into pressure-prompted ISTJ much?
Sure, but recognize that ISTJs are dominant perceivers.
That's true.
And so I think we should not be surprised to see them exhibiting more of the characteristics that we often associate with perception or perceiving than we might expect. And I think the opposite thing is true when we look at IPs, like the INFP or the INTP. We might find them being more like what we would expect of a person with a preference for judging.
This is Carol, absolutely. And I think I go to interaction styles for that. The behind the scenes and the chart the course, it seems to me, would be more likely to be early starting than pressure prompted. And what I've seen in ENTJs and ESTJs look like to me, it correlated with that in charge interaction style. But again, ladies, that is my making an inference here on just something I'm starting to observe. I don't have actual data on that, but I would love to further pursue that. This is Carol. Bob, thank you. Thank you.
Well, Carol, you go there, and I go to 8 functions. So, we go to, different places and start to make our own correlations, which I find to be really neat.
This is Carol. Me too, Bob. Ladies, I don't know if you remember the preferences, but between Bob's ISTJ and my ENFP, it has just been a delight for me in the past year to be working more closely with Bob because it really does. It brings a nice balance. Now, 20 years ago, I think Bob would have had to strangle me, but I think I'm more balanced now, Bob. I'm more easy for an ISTJ to deal with.
You might have hung up on me first, Carol.
That's great. Okay, ladies, anything to say, anything you want to ask or comment on step 2 before I move on?
No, that looks like a lot of good information.
Okay, good, thanks. We've got 2 more areas to cover here, and ladies, by the way, ladies, I need you to tell me the unvarnished truth. Here are the answers here for this. The reason I put this in your handout is because y'all are knowledgeable type people, and I want to give y'all a chance to apply your knowledge and not just be spoon-fed something you don't need to be spoon-fed. But is this annoying or is this helpful to get that in the handout instead of this? Because if it's just annoying, I'll stop doing it to people. If it's useful, I'll continue doing it.
This is Lori. I use it. For one thing, it keeps people engaged. It involves them to stick with it and just keep. Some people connect it better when they can write it down. So I use the blanks as well in when I'm doing presentations like this.
Okay, so Lori, thank you. Christy, do you have any comment here? Because I really don't want to be insulting adults' intelligence or annoying them by doing this.
No, I didn't find it annoying at all. I think it actually, it gives the participants a chance to think about the answers to those questions before we discuss them. So no, I think it's fine. I think the blanks are fine.
Okay, this is Carol. Thank you, ladies. I very much value your professional feedback here because that was my intention. And you saw this in the data yesterday. I was giving you all a chance to apply what we learned last week. And for these guys, temperament, if I'm only going to be given half a day, I will not go in and do type. I will go in and do temperament. now that I use the interaction styles more, I would listen to what the managers are saying and see if I needed to advocate for temperament or interaction styles first. And the reason is I see them as coming out of the room, being able to use something and apply it more quickly. Some groups, temperament, well, stabilizer and theorist, guys, this is a huge source of stress for them. Stabilizers are trying to stabilize the system. Theorists, especially young theorists, think about young INTJs, INTPs, ENTPs, ENTJs. They, especially, in our 20s, we can be pretty crystal clear, untempered examples of our own preferences. And they can, intuitive thinkers, the theorists, they can come across as so disrespectful. And guys, they're not intentionally being disrespectful. They just have a natural confidence in throwing a monkey wrench in the works and changing it to make it better. And they have to be it's in their blind spot. They have to be taught how scary and unhelpful this looks to the stabilizers. In scaring the stabilizers, making them feel like you're being disrespectful and risking things, doing risky things, high-risk things, it does not help them get along better. It keeps the stabilizers from trusting them. Then the stabilizers start micromanaging them. Now you're frustrating a bright theorist. Now you've got a theorist who's getting ready to go somewhere else or be on another team because they feel so frustrated, and the company loses. Absolutely, everybody loses if we can't help the stabilizers and the theorizers quit misinterpreting each other and help them stop reacting out of their blind spots toward each other. I just have found incredible mileage using this. I spent half a day on temperament theory, and we'll come back to this. Here's this is the literal, I'm giving you the exercise I use, and in all honesty, I stated it, I guess, on the other page. This is an adaptation of something I believe I learned from Otto Kroger, and I think I added the last question. I think I at least added number 4, but the whole point is coming from different temperaments, and I'm a big Linda Barron's materials have helped me tremendously. I teach from her materials on temperament. Understanding that different temperaments have core drivers, the stabilizer wanting to stabilize the system, the intuitive thinker, the theorist, needing absolutely incapable of not coming from the big picture, needing that to make sense, and having the confidence to juggle things and make things differently, and his need for competency, their natural lack of being concerned with what somebody's job title is. Stabilizers need people to respect the system in order to stabilize the system. So it looks really scary and unhelpful and disloyal and problematic to the stabilizer. I try to help the stabilizer reinterpret the behavior of the intuitive thinker so they can, instead of discounting a young theorist, so they can learn how to reinterpret that behavior and then learn how to refocus it for them so that instead of naturally being set off by each other, they can make good use of each other. And this is about communication and trust, because this is where they get in trouble. One, what do we need to trust someone? I ask them to self-select. I explain the temperaments, ask them to self-select. What do we need to trust each other? I ask them to fill these answers out from their temperament groups on flip chart papers. 2, what do others need to know to communicate effectively with us? And these answers are quite illuminating. It is very obvious that what makes a stabilizer trust somebody is very different. Their answers are all about respect and stabilizing the system and showing proper precautions. And the theorist puts entirely different things down there. It's all about competency for the theorist. In order to communicate, that's very different too. It's really fun when you do have a few improvisers in a room and they answer these questions, because we joke around about how the theorists make them just roll their eyes and bore them to tears, because the theorist will go on and on about the thinking behind something, And the improviser's stand there going, what do you want me to do about it? What do you want me to do about it? What do you want me to do about it? And they actually have fun with that. And the last question is self-reflection and getting them closer to action. To make something less difficult, name 2 things we could start doing, stop doing, do differently, experiment with. I naturally have those instructions a little vague because the stabilizers tend to literally, take those literally, and list 2 things to start doing, 2 to stop, 2 to do differently, and 2 to experiment with. And nobody else interprets that question that literally. And it's very interesting. And we make a learning point from that, too. When they cannot choose, this is fascinating to me, it never happened, by the way, until I started doing hardcore IT groups. I will get a group in the room. I'm sorry, I won't repeat this from last time. Remember the discussion about their inability to choose between, for example, stabilizer and theorist? That happened a lot. About, say, a quarter of the room would be incapable of choosing, so I created a stabilizer/theorist group from them. And guys, the correlation with their MBTI scores were incredible. They tended to score more with less clarity around sensing and intuiting. And they had judging preferences or they wouldn't have been pulled to stabilizer. And they tended to be more midline on S&N. And I found a larger proportion of folks in IT were more midline. And it makes sense, guys, the work they do requires them to pretty much function with both things going on, the systems perspective and the attention to that detail and the rigor and the structure of it. And when we debrief, I debrief improviser, stabilizer, theorist, catalyst, and then I'll debrief after doing stabilizers and theorists, I'll debrief the combined stabilizer theorist. And guys, it works out textbook every time. Their answers are a blend of what the stabilizer's answers were and the theorist answers were. And it just proves right there in the room, it proves the theory just is standing there living and breathing in front of them. And it just gives added credibility, and it gives them something useful to work with, something really useful to work with. These are my comments on this for that. And actually, we've just got one more major point to go on. I will go back to this, ladies, and it's about helping them reframe each group to the other group. There any questions or comments, ladies, about usefulness of temperament, and in particular, and in addition, how we can help them reframe their behaviors for each other so they can stand less in each other's natural blind spots?
No, I think I'm good.
Okay. I have found the temperament piece, especially when you consider the testing, the people developing the software and the testers. The testing group, hardcore stabilizer. Sometimes there's nobody but stabilizers on that group, and they really get frustrated with the more theorist-based R&D programming group. Okay. We are going to move on to pretty much the last piece. And, guys, this is a really, really big piece. First, I want to speak to the one at the bottom of the page because this is simply said, guys, I get so excited about the fact that introverted sensing, how beautifully that correlates with the stabilizer's gift, which is to bring wisdom from the past, because introverted sensing is about memory and about remembering how we did it before, what worked and what didn't, and about extroverted sensing and the improviser being fully present in the present moment and jumping into action. Guys, it blows their circuits. It's all right to teach both of these things, temperament and teach 8 function. I just would go tread lightly trying to help them make cross-correlation because I have just seen it in their eyes. I did it about 3 times. It blows their circuits. It takes them over the edge. It's not that they're not smart enough to understand it. it's just too much new information on top of others. So learn from my ENFP enthusiasm on this, and don't try that at home. And the piece I will spend real time on here is extroverted thinking and introverted thinking. Guys, this is a huge game changer for them. I had a very, let me see, here is a slide I use. I cannot give you the slide because I'm licensed to use it because I did Linda Barron's certification. What I will say is, and I'm actually happy to provide you with something I drafted that can be helpful here. But basically, and actually, if you've studied 8 Function with Bob McAlpin, you can draw from, you don't need these materials, draw from Bob's materials to compare and contrast extroverted thinking with introverted thinking. Guys, this makes incredible sense to them. The extroverted thinking, and it's not always, it's a lot of team members too, but classically it's the manager who's responsible for driving this process through. And the extroverted thinking manager, and I think my next slide has got the questions. Extroverted thinking, these are different conversations. What do we need to accomplish? When can it be done? What are the steps when you're committing to? And they're focused on supplying resources. And the introverted thinking team member is just not there yet. They've got a model in their head. They've got to adjust the model. They've got to study this. There are a lot of INTPs on these plans, some ISTPs, a lot of INTPs in these groups. How do I need to change the model in my head? And they're coming up with the reasons why this won't work. And then you have to do the reframe for them. The introverted thinker literally cannot execute until these questions get answered and resolved for them. And it just they get locked in mortal combat, the extroverted thinker and the introverted thinker. And the extroverted thinking manager decides the introverted thinking team member is just being a butthead and being resistant and not cooperating. And that's not true. And I need to help them understand why that's not true. And then I show them let me go here. I show them the way out of it. I teach them to switch. Go ahead.
This is Lori. Could you say that again, that they cannot execute unless what?
Oh, absolutely. Let me go back here. The introverted thinker cannot move into execution until these questions are resolved for them. They've got a model in their head. That's their North Star. That's their lantern. That gives them their light. The extroverted thinker trying to make this person execute before the model in their head works is trying to make them move forward in the darkness with no light to walk by. The introverted thinker cannot be successful without that model in their head because the model in their head tells them what to do. And it doesn't help to push them into action before the model in their head is working. And they use analysis to get the model in their head right, and then they move forward. And if the extroverted thinker wants to make that person talk about when can be done, what are the steps where you're committing to, they have to help this person get the analysis piece done and talked out and talked through. I explained these 2 conversations, and here, let me go back to the slide on the stories. And this is, sorry, ladies, I don't mean to be giving people whiplash here. It's this first story right here. And this actually came up in the training room. I explained the difference between introverted and extroverted thinking in the 2 different conversations, and the INTJ manager and the ENTP turned and looked at each other, and they just both burst out laughing together. Just burst out laughing, and the rest of the team kind of looked like, what are they doing? And I literally stopped the class and said, guys, what's so funny? And the manager looked at me and said, Carol, John here and I have been having that exact conversation for about 6 years. And the whole room died laughing. It was one team. And the whole room died laughing because, guys, they'd all witnessed that headbutting for 6 years. And these guys liked each other and they respected each other, but they totally did not get where the headbutting was coming from, and this told them where the headbutting was coming from. And 6 months later, I contacted that manager in an email and said, Jim, just if you would, how are things going? Is there anything helpful from the class? You want to talk about anything? And he said, every now and then, John and I find ourselves in that old place we used to go locked in that conversation, it doesn't work. And whichever one of us realizes it first says, hey, we're doing that thing again. And they don't remember introverted thinking or extroverted thinking, okay? They don't remember that. What they remember is we're doing that thing again, and that makes them laugh with each other, and then they back up, and then they start having the conversation at work. So, guys, this really is a big deal with all the thinking preference on these teams and the huge misunderstanding between extroverted and introverted thinking. Guys, if I had to pick one thing let me pick two things. If I had to pick two things only that were the biggest bang for the buck for me for dealing with these technical groups, it's this piece from the 8-function theory, introverted thinking and extroverted thinking. And then from temperament, it's helping the stabilizer and the theorist reframe each other's behavior to each other, and help them see how, not getting the other person's need met is not helping them work effectively together. If I only had to pick two, that's where I would go.
Carol, may I interject a little of John Beebe into it?
Absolutely. Well, actually, I got this from you and John Beebe, John, but go, please, inject more.
Well, what I find is, and I work, with teams in problem solving and all, and I get them to think about introverted thinking is defining. And so it's about defining the goal. Where are we trying to get to? Identifying the objective. And then extroverted thinking is about operationalizing. So it's about planning how to get to the goal or how to get to the objective. And so, there's a tendency for those people who prefer extroverted thinking not to really make sure everybody's agreed on the goal. And from an introverted thinking perspective, it's not, there's a tendency not to make sure that everyone is on board as to the pathway we're going to follow to try to get there. And so, we need both. We need to have a goal, and we need to have a pathway on how a planned pathway to get to the goal. And so we need to use both extroverted thinking and introverted thinking as we work at solving our problems and going through life. And that's it.
This is Carol Bob. Very well said. Absolutely. I will add some more to those two slides. That is very, very well said. And we do need both. We really do need both. We just have to help them not get stuck in their blind spot, unintentionally and unconsciously making the other guy wrong and not moving forward. And ladies, I'm just so proud of myself. I've got time for closure stuff, and I'm not making y'all be over today and give you some time to talk about something here at the end. I would like to bargain for a minute or two for plus delta at the end. If there's anything you want to tell me or Bob, what worked well for your learning or what we could do differently in future classes or teaching this class again to make it go better. But I like to actually start from input of course, first any questions you have, but any blinding flash, the obvious or aha, and I'm especially interested in something from this material that looks useful enough you'll actually want to apply it. You see right now the usefulness of applying something we've talked about. So I'll take input from either direction, comments anyone has now, either Laurie or Christy. Whoever doesn't have sushi in their mouth can start first.
I'm done with my sushi, so I guess I'll go.
Well, where would you like? Go ahead. Just tell me where to start, because I'm actually going to take notes. Where am I recording something for you?
I guess on the page you have up now, on the AHA page.
Okay, great.
I don't know that I have one specifically. I took about 3 pages of notes today, which is for me is quite a lot. So I think there was definitely a lot of good concrete things that I would certainly use in workshops. I'm looking through my notes to see if I can pick out one in particular. Oh, I just have so much stuff here.
And this is Carol, and that's fine. I'm happy to take more and not also, but thank you. This is actually good information. This is helpful to me and Bob to know that this looked meaty, that what you got here looked meaty, and there were useful, tangible things in here.
Good.
But I'm happy to take more.
I was just going to say, I have to agree because I sat down and I've gone back now looking through notes as well, and there are quite a few of them, not only from this one but from the last one.
Oh, and that's what I was going to ask you, ladies. If you want, I'd like to give you the opportunity from last time. I was about framing it and doing things that help establish rapport and get credibility with them. Should I spend less time on that in the future, or were there valuable things in that? It seems to me that's a little less tangible than this learning points piece, but it seems to me that framing it right in a way that connects with them and helps you have credibility with them is important. But please give me candid feedback if I hit that right, or if I could hit that a little less time intensely. I'm happy to take your feedback on that. It sounds like to me.
Lori, go ahead.
No, well, it sounds like to me you said you had added that you even took good notes from last time too.
Oh, absolutely. And whereas I've not necessarily had a technical team come to me for this training, I've done what we call like an open enrollment type of sessions where I have had some technical people come in, and I too have just brought in the MBTI book and manual. And if anybody has any questions or questions of validity of this information, I'll be happy to go through it with you. And even just having that, volume there in the room with me oftentimes can be enough for those handful or one or two people who may have those questions. That's a very, very powerful visual for them.
This is Carol. Thank you so much for adding it. I hadn't heard somebody else say they'd used that the same way before, and I'm glad to know other people are having. Even if they don't come up and look at it afterwards, I think the fact that we show up with that in the room means that we're not hiding something. It's not mysterious, and that literally there's something to be looked at, and we're open about it. And the fact that they can have access to see it, I think, buys us some credibility. So thank you. Thank you for that. Anything else? Like somebody was going to say something earlier before I asked about last week too.
Well, this is Christy. I didn't think it was too much last week, because if you don't set the groundwork properly, particularly with these IT groups, you're not going to get to this sort of meat of the information with them, because you're going to lose them from the very beginning. So, no, I thought it was fine in terms of the amount and type of information that you gave.
Great. Thank you so much, Trish. I really appreciate that feedback. It was okay there. Thank you. I really appreciate that. Is there something new you picked up, either of you picked up? Well, you said you had lots of notes. If it's something that's occurred to you now that you'll actually concretely apply from this, that would be very useful for me and Bob to know that too.
This is Lori. For me, being an N and talking big picture to become more concrete in my language that I use to introduce this information, and it may have to become a bit scripted because naturally I'm going to think bigger picture.
This is Carol. Lori, thank you for that. That's my preference there is so clear. I'm so in danger of staying conceptual, and that's why I tell so many stories. It's not to be entertaining, and it's not to just hear myself tell stories. That makes things concrete for them, and I repeatedly get in the feedback that the stories really work for their learning. I'm not just trying to be entertaining. I want y'all to know that. It's not just me trying to be entertaining. The concreteness, and that's how, as a clear in preference, Lori, that I get concrete. I give a specific example. the creativity person. Oh, gosh, I'm blanking on her name. She's Canadian. Go ahead.
Marcy Siegel.
Thank you so much. Marcy Siegel's answer to this question is stories, lots of them. I made a posting on that listserv. This ENFP had a lot to learn from her ESTP improviser colleague. Quote, stories, lots of them. That's what makes it real to people.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Mark. Anything else to add here?
This is Christy. I like the exercise, the specific exercise you showed on the temperaments also, and the questions that you posed to them to get them to sort of self-assess how their temperament affects the others in the group. I thought that was good self-reflection for them.
This is Carol, thanks. And the point of that is it helps them draw a bridge between the interesting training event and what goes on back of the office, because it is about trust and it is about communication that makes them more effective. And the temperaments piece the temperaments piece helps get at that in the way the other things don't. The reason I use multiple models is not just trying to be interesting with multiple models, it's because they bring, and temperament really brings something to the table the other models don't bring. That's why I use it. Thank you, Lacey. Is there anything you want Bob and me to plus, anything you want us to keep doing the same because it worked well for your learning in these sessions? And the delta, anything you want us to change that would have made the learning more valuable to you?
Well, I always like getting the handouts ahead of time, so I'll give that as a plus.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I'm going to add content worth taking notes on, because ladies, I'm very, you two are not beginning practitioners here. Y'all are experienced. I love working with adult learners. Y'all are experienced type people, and it was very rewarding to me to hear that there were things worth you taking notes on, because this is just a specific application I've got experience in. And if I can give you things that save you time and help you be more effective more quickly with them and not learn some of the things I learned, shall we say, the hard way, that is what I have invested in this. I really, really want to make that happen. And ladies, we'll be sending you out, Bob's office will be sending you out a response sheet that gives you time to put some more things down if you'd like. We very much value feedback. And ladies, thank you for showing up and being present and obviously being engaged and asking good questions. I really enjoyed my learning time with you. Go ahead. This is Carol. Go ahead. I'm sorry. Someone's trying to speak. Bob, can you speak? I'm not hearing anyone speak right now.
Yeah, I'm here.
Okay.
I'm here.
Laurie,
I
Christy,
don't know if anybody was trying to speak or not, Carol. I just...
Okay. I thought I had talked over someone, so I was trying not to do that.
Yeah, I thought you did too, but they're not adding.
Okay. Ladies, thank you. I appreciate very much your attendance and your being present and being such interesting learners to engage with.
Thanks, Carol.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Okay, Bob. Bob, are you there? Okay, Bob, I'm going to hang up and call you at the office.